Thank you. Anybody here happy with what's going on in Washington? Well, if it's any consolation, I kept them up till 3 in the morning, haranguing them and telling them, you know what? I'm not for adding 1 penny more in debt. Here's what frustrates me. We elected a Republican House. We elected a Republican Senate, and what do we have to show for it? Nothing. The debt continues to rise. The spending continues to rise. In fact, this deal was put together by the Republican establishment and President Obama. What does the deal do? It allows President Obama unlimited ability to add debt in his last year. Anybody think that's a good idea? The right and the left got together, and this is important to understand because it also goes to the uniqueness of my candidacy. The left wants more welfare. They want more domestic spending. But some on the right say, oh, we've got to have more military spending. So you know what? They both get together and they raise both. But as a consequence, we go further and further into debt. And some say, well, military is important. Sure it is. It's the most important thing we do in Washington is defend the country, and I will do whatever it takes and spend whatever it takes to defend our country. But this doesn't mean a blank check. This just doesn't mean we can go further and further into debt, that we're somehow going to say, oh, we're stronger and stronger by adding more and more to the debt. I don't think that we project power to the world. I don't think we project strength to the world if we're doing it from bankruptcy court. So you have to look at spending across the board, and if you say to yourself that you're a fiscal conservative, you have to be conservative with all money, whether it's military money or domestic welfare. The compromise in Washington is going in the wrong direction. The compromise in Washington is to raise all spending. What we really need is a compromise where we cut spending and hold the line all the way across the board. All spending has to be conserved. Now, some will say, oh my goodness, where would we cut any spending? How can we cut any spending? I'll give you a couple of examples. We spend $15 million on free education for foreign students. Where in the world does the Constitution say that we need to be providing free education for foreign students? That's crazy. We spent $800,000 last year in Afghanistan developing a televised cricket league so they can watch cricket on TV. Only problem is they don't have televisions in Afghanistan. 1 in 10,000 people have a television in Afghanistan. And why in the world would we be borrowing money from China to send it to Afghanistan? It's insane. We spent $250,000 last year bringing 24 kids from Pakistan to send them to space camp in Alabama. I know a lot of American kids who would like to go to space camp can't afford it. What in the world are we sending our money to Pakistan to bring their kids to a space camp? We spent about $300,000 studying whether or not Japanese quail are more sexually promiscuous on cocaine. I think we could have just polled the audience. But why does this spending go on and on? Why do we keep spending money hand over fist that is wasted? Well, the reason we do is because people in Washington lack the courage to stop it. We have the power to stop it. Spending automatically expires every year. So when they tell you, oh, we don't have the votes to defund Planned Parenthood, hogwash. It's not true. Planned Parenthood's funding expires like all funding expires at the end of the year. I say, let it expire until the liberals have started up again. When we look at where money is being spent, we have to make some decisions. We send money virtually everywhere on the planet. There was a map yesterday that was produced that shows where we send money. There's almost no country on it that we're not sending money to. But I thought, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't send any to our enemies. You think we could just start by not sending any money to our enemies? How out of touch is Washington, though? If you ask people here in the crowd, how many of you think we should spend money or send money to countries that persecute Christians? 1. All right. 2. All right. We have 2 people who want to send money to persecute Christians. Almost nobody believes we should send money around the world to countries that persecute Christians. So I put in a bill, and in my bill I said, no money to any country that persecutes Christians. And how did I define that? I define that by any country that puts Christians to death for criticizing the state religion. But here's the problem. When I introduced it into the Foreign Relations Committee, do you know what the vote was? 18-2 to continue sending your money to countries that persecute Christians. They just don't get it, and that's why I'm a big proponent of limiting all their terms. They all need term limits. People ask me, what's the worst thing the president has done? And I say, how long do you have? If you want to sum it all up, though, it isn't just Obamacare. It isn't just the banking regulations. It's not just the new environmental regulations. The real thing that the president has bequeathed to us that is unfortunate is the collapse of the separation of powers. We were supposed to have co-equal branches of government. We were supposed to have government that would have checks and balances. Madison put it this way. Madison said that the ambition of Congress to gain power would be checked against the ambition of the president to gain power. And there would be checks and balances. We've had a total collapse of that. The equilibrium that once existed is gone. The president is writing all of the rules by executive order. If I'm president, on day 1, I'll eliminate all of those burdensome executive orders. If we want to win again, if Republicans want to win the president, there are 18 states that we haven't won in 30 years. How are we going to win those states again? Now, some of the muckety-mucks and the powers that be say, we need to dilute our values. We need to dilute what we stand for. We need to be Democrat-light. Anybody think we need to be Democrat-light to win again? I think we keep all our values. In fact, I think we need to be more boldly for what we are for. But we do have to figure out how to have a bigger party. We have always been the party of limited government, of less regulation, of lower taxation. But you know what happens in Washington? You can't get them to even vote for a tax cut in Washington anymore. I have a tax plan that would wipe out all 70,000 pages of the tax code and the IRS. One simple postcard, one single rate for business, and one single rate for individuals. But my tax plan does something that they're afraid of in Washington, both Republicans and Democrats. In Washington, they say, well, we're not going to cut taxes, we're just going to shift the burden. Half of you will get a tax cut, and half of you will get a tax increase, and we'll call it fair. Well, you have to understand where jobs are created. Jobs are created by the private sector. So what we need is more money left in the private sector. To me, it's as simple as this. I want to leave more money in Iowa and send less money to Washington. If we want to win again, we need to broaden our horizons. We need a new and bigger party. So what I've been saying as I've traveled the country is that what we need to become is the party of the entire Bill of Rights. We're doing great on the Second Amendment. Most of us here to support the Second Amendment. I support the Second Amendment. In fact, if you don't believe me, come to my house unannounced. But we have to support the Bill of Rights in its entirety. If you want to support the Second Amendment, you got to support the Fourth Amendment, which says that's the right to be left alone, the right to not have the government come in your house without a warrant. We need to defend the entire Bill of Rights. What does the Ninth Amendment say? Most people forget about the Ninth Amendment, but the Ninth Amendment was one of the most important parts of the Bill of Rights. In fact, the Bill of Rights would have never passed without the Ninth Amendment, because many of the critics said, well, if you list certain rights, the people will think that's all of the rights, and they'll think that that's a complete listing. So the people who put the Bill of Rights on the Constitution said, we need to make sure they know this is just the beginning. It's an impartial or incomplete list of your Bill of Rights. So the Ninth Amendment says those rights not listed are not to be disparaged because your rights come from your Creator and they are unlimited. The 10th Amendment says those powers not delegated specifically to Congress are left to the states and the people respectively. If we obeyed that, you'd have a balanced budget every year because half of what they do, at least half of what they're doing in Washington, was never specified by the Constitution. If we want to broaden the appeal of our party, if we want to be the party that becomes big enough to win Iowa again, big enough to win Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all of these states that we haven't been winning, we need to bring new people in. And what I've been talking a lot about is the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. The Fifth Amendment says that the government doesn't have the right to take your property. The government cannot take your property without due process. And you would think, well, who could be against that? Well, we've had this debate with Mr. Trump because Mr. Trump, that's part of his business model, is to take property through eminent domain for his casinos. I think it's wrong, and if I'm president, no private property will be taken by government and given to another private property owner. The Sixth Amendment says that you have a right to a trial by jury, and you think, well, gosh, who can be against that? Well, I've been at the forefront of trying to defend your right to a trial by jury, but I can tell you some of it's slipping away. In 2011, we had a bill that said that an American citizen can be indefinitely detained. And I fought it tooth and nail. In fact, I had a debate on the floor with another Republican senator. And I don't like to name names, but he was from Arizona. And I said incredulously, do you mean that an American citizen could be put in prison forever without a trial? And he said, yes, if they're dangerous. I said, sort of begs the question, doesn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not? The right to a trial by jury is something we've fought long and hard for. I know a young man who lost both legs and an arm in the war. When I asked him what he was fighting for, he says, for the Bill of Rights. Wouldn't it be sad if we gave up on that? Wouldn't it be sad if he gave up so much, and while he was gone, we gave up on the Bill of Rights? When I had that debate, and McCain was saying, we're just going to pluck people up who we think are dangerous, I was thinking of the times we got it wrong. I was thinking of the times when we incarcerated the Japanese Americans during World War II by the hundreds of thousands for no crime at all. I was thinking how we got it wrong when we tapped the phones of civil rights leaders in the 60s and those who protested against the war. I was thinking of the times when we've got it wrong. Richard Jewell was falsely accused of the Olympic Square bombing. You remember about 15, 20 years ago? Everybody said he did it. It was all over television. But he didn't do it. In fact, the networks had to pay him millions of dollars. And I was thinking to myself during this debate over the right to a trial by jury, I was thinking, what if Richard Jewell had been a black man in the South in 1920? He might not have lived the rest of the day. See, the Republican Party has been the party of civil rights. We have been the party of justice. We have been the party of equal protection. You know what? We don't have to give up on any of our philosophy of limited government. It's part of our message. We just need to recapture that message of justice. And when we do, when we become the party of the entire Bill of Rights, when we become the party of justice again, when we become the party that defends the right to a trial by jury with the same fervor and the same passion that we defend the Second Amendment, we're going to rock and roll to victory. I want to be part of that party, and I hope...